The surviving Confederation ships limped away from the New Harmony system, their hulls scarred by weapons fire, and their crews shaken by losses they had never imagined possible. Sub-Admiral Tex Mari, the highest-ranking officer to survive the battle, stared at the tactical reports that showed over half his fleet destroyed or crippled by a human force one-tenth their size. The numbers made no sense according to everything the Confederation knew about warfare and military doctrine. Commander Maria Santos watched the alien retreat from the bridge of the Ghostwalker, her stealth destroyer, now the most powerful human vessel remaining in the system. The sight of enemy ships fleeing filled her with grim satisfaction, but she also felt the weight of command and the responsibility for protecting what remained of human forces. Santos had never expected to survive the battle, much less find herself leading the aftermath. Reports of the battle spread through galactic communication networks faster than the surviving ships could travel, carrying news that shocked alien civilizations across known space. The Trilaxian Republic, which had mocked human warnings just months earlier, suddenly found their military advisors recommending immediate diplomatic contact with Earth. The Nexari Confederation began emergency sessions to discuss how to deal with a species that preferred death to surrender. Admiral Sam Carter received the first reports of the battle while aboard the UES Indomitable, a heavy cruiser commanded by Captain Steve Harris that had been rushing toward New Harmony with reinforcements. The coded messages from Santos painted a picture of devastating human losses, but also decisive psychological victory over alien forces. Carter realized that the sacrifice of her brave crews had achieved something more valuable than military conquest. 3. Days after the battle, alien governments began sending surrender offers through diplomatic channels. Their messages filled with references to human military prowess and requests for peaceful coexistence. The Zephyrian Empire, which had started the conflict with arrogant demands for submission, now begged for ceasefire negotiations and offered to release all human prisoners immediately. The speed of the change in alien attitudes amazed human diplomats. Captain Steve Harris brought the Indomitable into the New Harmony system to find a debris field that stretched across millions of kilometers, the wreckage of both human and alien ships mixing together in silent testimony to the battle's ferocity. Harris had fought in several wars during his career, but he had never seen destruction on such a scale from a single engagement. The sight filled him with both pride and sorrow for the crews who had paid the ultimate price. Commander Santos transferred her flag to the Indomitable and briefed Admiral Carter on the battle's details, explaining how human crews had chosen death over surrender when faced with impossible odds. She described Captain Murphy's final charge in the Retribution and Captain Rodriguez's ramming attack in the Unstoppable, emphasizing that both officers had opportunities to surrender, but instead chose to make their deaths count for something greater than individual survival. Carter listened to the reports with growing understanding of how completely the battle had changed galactic perceptions of human capabilities. The aliens who had viewed humans as primitive upstarts now spoke of them with genuine fear and respect, unable to comprehend a species that treated certain death as preferable to dishonor. The psychological impact of human tactics had achieved strategic victory despite tactical defeat. The Nexari counselor Velthara arrived at New Harmony aboard a diplomatic vessel, her compound eyes reflecting genuine nervousness as she requested permission to meet with human commanders. The alien who had once dismissed human warnings with amusement now spoke carefully about the need for peaceful resolution of territorial disputes. Velthara had studied the battle reports and realized that her species could not afford to fight enemies who viewed death as just another weapon. Carter agreed to meet with the alien diplomat aboard the Indomitable, but insisted that the negotiations take place under human terms rather than Confederation protocols. She wanted the aliens to understand that humanity now held the stronger position despite their recent losses. The meeting took place in the ship's main conference room, with human officers standing at attention while the alien representative waited nervously for discussions to begin. Velthara offered immediate release of all human prisoners, recognition of human territorial claims, and establishment of formal diplomatic relations based on equality rather than submission. The alien diplomat spoke carefully about her government's desire to avoid further conflict with a species that had demonstrated such devastating military capabilities. She emphasized that the Confederation now understood the warnings that had been dismissed at Kepler Station. Carter listened to the offers with careful attention, but made it clear that human demands went beyond simple ceasefire agreements. She explained that humanity expected full compensation for ships and lives lost in the unprovoked attack, along with guarantees that no alien force would ever again threaten human civilians. Carter wanted the galaxy to understand that attacking humans carried consequences that extended far beyond immediate military results. The negotiations continued for several days as more alien governments sent representatives to discuss terms with human forces. The Trilaxian Republic offered trade agreements and technology exchanges, while smaller species requested protection from larger empires that might threaten their independence. The galaxy had suddenly awakened to the reality that humans represented a new power that could not be ignored or intimidated. Commander Jake Morrison arrived from Kepler Station aboard a fast courier ship, his diplomatic credentials now carrying far more weight than they had during his original warnings to the Alien Council. Morrison met with Carter and Santos to discuss the long-term implications of their victory, emphasizing that humanity needed to use their new reputation wisely to secure lasting peace rather than temporary advantage. Morrison explained that alien governments were frantically studying human military doctrine, trying to understand how crews could fight so effectively when faced with certain death. The concept of refusing surrender under any circumstances was completely foreign to species that viewed warfare as an extension of diplomacy rather than a fight for survival. Human tactics had revealed fundamental differences in how species approached conflict. Captain Harris brought disturbing intelligence reports from human space, indicating that several alien empires were attempting to develop countermeasures for human tactics. Some species were experimenting with automated weapons that could not be intimidated, while others were trying to develop psychological warfare techniques that might break human morale. The victory at New Harmony had earned respect, but it had also created new enemies. Carter realized that humanity needed to follow up their psychological victory with concrete political achievements that would prevent future conflicts. She proposed establishing a human embassy on every major alien world, staffed by military officers who could remind potential enemies of what happened when humans were forced to fight. The galaxy needed constant reminders that human warships were unyielding forces that could not be defeated by conventional means. Santos suggested creating a permanent memorial in the New Harmony system, using wreckage from the battle to construct a monument that would remind future visitors of the price paid for peace. The memorial would honor both human and alien crews who died in the engagement, while serving as a warning to anyone who might consider threatening human civilians. Every ship passing through the system would see evidence of what happened when humans were pushed too far. The final diplomatic agreement established humanity as a major galactic power with rights equal to the oldest alien civilizations, a recognition that would have taken centuries to achieve through peaceful means. The treaty included provisions for mutual defense and technology sharing, along with guarantees that human expansion would not be hindered by alien interference. Carter signed the documents knowing that her brave crews had purchased these agreements with their lives. Admiral Carter stood before the assembled crews of her surviving ships, addressing men and women who had witnessed the transformation of humanity from a minor species to a respected galactic power. She reminded them that their fallen comrades had not died in vain, but had instead purchased with their blood the respect and recognition that would protect future generations of human explorers and colonists. News of the diplomatic victory reached Earth just as construction began on a new class of warships designed to carry human military doctrine to the farthest reaches of known space. Each vessel would bear the names of ships lost at New Harmony, ensuring that the galaxy never forgot the lesson taught by crews who chose death over surrender. The UES Retribution II and UES Unstoppable II would carry the tradition forward to new battles and new victories. The galaxy had learned that human warships were truly unyielding forces, not because of superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but because of an unbreakable will that turned every vessel into a weapon that could not be defeated by conventional means. The aliens who had ignored the warning about human determination now understood that. Admiral Sam Carter stood in the command center of Terra Station, watching through massive windows as human warships gathered in Earth's orbital space. The sight filled her with both pride and grim determination as ship after ship arrived from patrol duties and training exercises, their crews eager to answer the call for military action. Carter had spent 30 years in the human fleet, rising through the ranks during conflicts that taught her the value of overwhelming force when diplomacy failed. The heavy cruiser UES Retribution appeared first, its dark hull bristling with weapon, turrets, and sensor arrays. Captain Alex Murphy commanded the vessel with the steady confidence of an officer who had fought in 3 different wars, never losing a ship or abandoning a mission. The Retribution represented everything humans had learned about building warships, with thick armor plating designed to absorb energy weapons and kinetic cannons that could punch holes through asteroids. Next came the stealth destroyer UES Ghost. Walker, barely visible even to human sensors, as it slipped through space like its name suggested. Commander Maria Santos had earned her reputation during the Outer Colony raids, where her ship had destroyed 6 enemy vessels without ever being detected. The Ghost Walker carried experimental weapons that pushed the limits of human technology, including rail guns that fired projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. The massive dreadnought UES Unstoppable arrived last, its bulk dwarfing every other ship in the fleet. Captain Ben Rodriguez had specifically requested command of the largest vessel, knowing that its heavy armor and overwhelming firepower would be needed in the coming battle. The ship lived up to its name with redundant systems that allowed it to keep fighting even after sustaining damage that would cripple lesser vessels. Carter assembled her senior officers in the secure briefing room, where Lieutenant Paul Davis had prepared detailed intelligence reports on alien military capabilities. The young officer had spent months studying Confederation tactics, learning everything humans could discover about their enemies through diplomatic contacts and captured data. His analysis painted a picture of an enemy that relied on numerical superiority and energy weapons rather than tactical innovation. Davis explained that the Galactic Confederation had not fought a serious war in over 200 years, making Their crews experienced in peacekeeping operations, but unprepared for desperate combat. Their ships carried powerful energy shields and plasma cannons, but were designed for quick victories against enemies who would surrender when faced with overwhelming odds. The aliens had never encountered opponents who preferred death to defeat. Captain Murphy studied the tactical displays, noting that alien formations followed predictable patterns based on mathematical calculations rather than battlefield improvisation. He suggested that human forces could exploit this rigidity by using unconventional tactics that violated standard military doctrine. Murphy had learned during the Mars Wars that enemies who followed rules could be defeated by forces willing to break those same rules. Commander Santos proposed using the Ghost Walker's stealth capabilities to strike enemy command ships while the main fleet engaged their battle line. Her destroyer could penetrate alien formations undetected, targeting the vessels that coordinated enemy movements and communications. Santos knew that alien fleets relied heavily on centralized command structures that could be disrupted by surgical strikes. Captain Rodriguez advocated for direct confrontation, arguing that the Unstoppable could absorb enough enemy fire to allow smaller ships to close range for devastating attacks. His dreadnought carried enough armor to survive concentrated bombardment, while its massive guns could destroy enemy vessels with single shots. Rodriguez believed that showing aliens the true power of human warships would end the conflict faster than elaborate tactical maneuvers. Carter listened to each proposal while studying intelligence reports that confirmed her worst fears about alien intentions. The Confederation was mobilizing a massive fleet to crush human resistance and make an example that would discourage other species from challenging their authority. Admiral Kethvar himself would command the operation, bringing over 200 ships to ensure complete victory. The intelligence reports revealed that the aliens expected easy conquest, viewing humans as primitives who would collapse under the first serious assault. They planned to destroy several human ships as examples, then demand surrender of the entire fleet and submission to Confederation authority. The alien commanders had no understanding of human military culture or the concept of fighting to the last breath. Carter called for detailed analysis of human ship capabilities, wanting to ensure that every vessel could contribute to the coming battle. The fleet included experimental technologies that had never been tested in combat, including new types of armor that could disperse energy weapons and kinetic shields that turned enemy projectiles into harmless debris. Each ship carried backup, systems that allowed continued operation even after primary systems failed. Davis presented disturbing intelligence about alien weapons technology, including plasma cannons that could reduce human ships to molten metal and energy shields that deflected most types of projectiles. The aliens possessed significant technological advantages in direct combat, forcing humans to rely on tactical innovation and superior determination rather than superior equipment. Carter revealed her strategy for the coming battle, explaining that human forces would demonstrate why their warships were truly unyielding rather than attempting conventional victory. Each ship would be equipped with special protocols that ensured enemy forces paid maximum cost for any success they achieved. The goal was not just military victory, but psychological impact that would reshape alien perceptions of human capabilities. The Admiral explained Protocol 7, a last resort option that turned disabled human ships into massive kinetic weapons. When a vessel could no longer fight effectively, its crew could overload the reactor and ram enemy ships at maximum speed, creating explosions that could destroy multiple targets. The protocol represented everything humans stood for, refusing to give up even in certain death. Murphy volunteered his ship for the most dangerous assignments, knowing that the Retribution's heavy armor made it ideal for absorbing enemy fire, while other vessels maneuvered for attack. He assured Carter that his crew understood the risks and was prepared for whatever sacrifice might be required. Murphy had served with many of his officers for years, building the trust necessary for desperate combat. Santos requested permission to operate independently, using the Ghost Walker's stealth systems to strike targets of opportunity while avoiding direct confrontation with the main alien fleet. Her destroyer could cause maximum disruption with minimum risk, preserving human forces while inflicting disproportionate damage on enemy coordination and morale. Rodriguez insisted that the Unstoppable would anchor the human battle line, providing a fixed point around which smaller ships could rally and regroup. His dreadnought could absorb punishment that would destroy lesser vessels, while its massive guns could engage multiple enemies simultaneously. Rodriguez promised that his ship would keep fighting until nothing remained but debris. Carter concluded the briefing by reminding her officers that they represented more than just military forces. They carried the honor and determination of the entire human species. The coming battle would determine whether humanity earned respect among the stars or faced subjugation by aliens who viewed them as primitives. Every shot fired and every ship lost would send a message about human resolve. The fleet began final preparations for departure, with crews loading ammunition and checking systems that might mean the difference between victory and defeat. Engineers worked around the clock to install new weapons and defensive upgrades, while medical teams prepared for casualties that were certain to come. Every person understood that they might not return from the mission as the ships formed up. For departure, Carter broadcast a final message to all crews, reminding them that human warships had never surrendered and never would. She told them that aliens expected quick victory over primitive opponents, but would instead discover why humans built their ships for war rather than show. The fleet would demonstrate that human vessels were truly unyielding forces that could not be stopped by overwhelming odds. The assembled warships began moving toward the edge of the solar system, their engines burning bright against the darkness of space. Behind them, Earth continued its eternal rotation, unaware that its children were heading toward a battle that would determine the future of human expansion among the stars. Admiral Carter watched the fleet depart from her command ship, knowing that many of those brave crews would not survive the coming engagement. But she also knew that their sacrifice would teach the galaxy a lesson about human determination that would never be forgotten. The aliens had ignored the warning about human warships, and now they would learn the truth through bitter experience. The Confederation fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the New Harmony system, their ships forming perfect battle formations that stretched across thousands of kilometers of space. Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge of his flagship, surveying the 200 vessels under his command with satisfaction. The massive armada represented the largest military force the Confederation had assembled in decades, more than enough to crush any resistance from primitive human forces. The alien fleet moved in precise coordination, their purple and gold hulls gleaming under the light of the system's star as they advanced toward the inner planets. Each ship carried enough firepower to level cities, while their energy shields could deflect most known weapons. Admiral Kethvar expected the battle to last no more than a few hours, ending with complete human surrender and submission to Confederation authority. Long-range sensors detected human ships positioned near the gas giant in the outer system, apparently waiting in defensive formation for the alien advance. Kethvar studied the tactical display with amusement, noting that the humans had only a dozen vessels against his overwhelming force. The alien commander ordered his fleet to attack formation, confident that a single coordinated assault would destroy all human resistance. Captain Alex Murphy watched the approaching enemy fleet from the bridge of the UES Retribution, his ship's armor plating already configured for maximum energy absorption. The heavy cruiser occupied the center of the human formation, its crew prepared for the desperate battle that was about to begin. Murphy had fought in enough wars to know that courage and determination could sometimes overcome impossible odds. The first alien ships opened fire at maximum range, sending streams of plasma energy racing across space toward the human vessels. The deadly beams struck the Retribution's hull with tremendous force, but the specially designed armor plating dispersed the energy across its surface rather than allowing penetration. Murphy ordered return fire, sending tungsten slugs toward the enemy at incredible velocity. Admiral Kethvar watched in surprise as the human ship absorbed his fleet's opening barrage without significant damage, then responded with kinetic weapons that punched through alien shields like they were made of paper. 3 Confederation vessels took direct hits, their hulls ruptured by projectiles moving at significant fractions of light speed. The alien commander realized that humans possessed more advanced technology than intelligence reports had suggested. The battle intensified as more alien ships joined the attack, concentrating their fire on the stubborn human cruiser that refused to be destroyed. The Retribution's hull glowed white-hot under the assault, but its crew continued fighting with grim determination. Murphy ordered his weapons officer to target enemy command ships, knowing that disrupting alien coordination was more important than destroying individual vessels. Commander Maria Santos used the chaos of the main battle to bring the Ghostwalker into position for surprise attacks on the alien rear guard. Her stealth destroyer remained invisible to enemy sensors as it approached a cluster of Confederation support ships. Santos waited until the perfect moment before opening fire, her railgun sending projectiles through multiple alien hulls before they even realized they were under attack. The alien fleet began to lose formation as human tactics proved more effective than expected, but Admiral Kethvar ordered continued assault on the enemy cruiser that seemed to anchor human resistance. He committed additional ships to the attack, determined to destroy the vessel that had already cost him a dozen valuable warships. The concentrated firepower finally began to overwhelm the Retribution's defensive systems. Captain Murphy realized that his ship could not survive much longer under the massive bombardment, but he also knew that retreat was not an option for human warships. He ordered his crew to prepare Protocol 7, the last resort that would turn their dying vessel into a weapon against the enemy. The Retribution's reactor began building toward critical overload, while Murphy set course for the nearest concentration of alien ships. Lieutenant Tom Williams coordinated the final targeting solution from his position at the weapons console, ensuring that the Retribution's sacrifice would achieve maximum damage against enemy forces. The young officer had served on 3 different ships during his career, but none had faced odds as impossible as these. Williams felt honored to serve with a crew that chose heroic death over shameful surrender. The Retribution accelerated toward the alien fleet even as plasma beams tore through its hull, the ship's massive bulk building momentum for its final attack. Captain Murphy broadcast a farewell message to the rest of the human fleet, reminding them that their sacrifice would be remembered and that human warships never gave up. The cruiser's reactor reached critical mass just as it struck the alien formation. The explosion lit up the entire system like a newborn star, vaporizing the Retribution and 6 alien ships while severely damaging dozens more. The blast sent shockwaves through both fleets, but the psychological impact on the aliens was even greater than the physical destruction. Admiral HFY stared in disbelief at the tactical display, unable to comprehend why humans would choose certain death over reasonable surrender. Commander Santos used the confusion caused by the massive explosion to continue her attacks on isolated alien vessels, appearing and disappearing like a ghost as her destroyer struck targets throughout the enemy formation. The Ghostwalker's advanced stealth systems allowed it to avoid detection even while firing, making alien crews paranoid about attacks from invisible enemies. Santos knew that fear could be as effective as weapons in breaking enemy morale. Captain Ben Rodriguez brought the massive dreadnought UES Unstoppable into the battle just as alien forces began to recover from the shock of the Retribution sacrifice. The huge vessel absorbed enemy fire with its thick armor plating while returning, devastating shots from its main guns. Each projectile from the Unstoppable could destroy smaller alien ships with single hits, forcing enemy forces to concentrate their attacks on this new threat. The alien fleet surrounded the human dreadnought, pouring everything they had into its heavily armored hull in an attempt to stop its rampage through their formation. Rodriguez smiled grimly as his ship shrugged off damage that would have vaporized lesser vessels, its redundant systems keeping weapons and engines operational despite tremendous punishment. The Unstoppable lived up to its name by continuing to fight when logic said it should have been destroyed. Admiral HFY ordered his remaining ships to withdraw from the human dreadnought and regroup for another coordinated assault, but his fleet was no longer responding with the precision he expected. The unexpected resistance and heavy casualties had shaken alien confidence, while human tactics continued to inflict damage far beyond what should have been possible. The Confederation force that had expected easy victory was instead fighting for survival. The battle reached its climax when concentrated alien fire finally penetrated the Unstoppable's armor and damaged its main reactor, causing power fluctuations throughout the massive ship. Rodriguez realized that his vessel was dying, but he also saw an opportunity to strike a final blow against enemy morale. He ordered maximum acceleration toward Admiral HFY's flagship, intending to ram the alien command vessel and end the battle in mutual destruction. The Unstoppable's engines roared to life one last time, pushing the damaged dreadnought toward its target at incredible speed. Alien gunners poured fire into the charging vessel, but their weapons could not stop its massive bulk from building momentum. Rodriguez broadcast his final message as the distance closed, telling the galaxy that human warships were truly unyielding, forces that could not be defeated by overwhelming odds. The collision between the two flagships created another massive explosion that was visible from the inner planets, destroying both vessels and sending debris racing through space at tremendous velocity. Admiral HFY died never understanding why humans preferred death to surrender, taking with him the arrogance that had led the Confederation into this disastrous battle. Commander Santos found herself in command of the surviving human forces. As alien ships began retreating from the battlefield, their crews demoralized by losses they had never expected to suffer, the Ghostwalker emerged from stealth to survey the debris field that marked the site of humanity's first major space battle. The cost had been terrible, but the message was clear. Human warships would fight to the death rather than submit to alien demands. The Confederation fleet withdrew to a safe distance to count their losses and try to understand what had gone wrong with their carefully planned operation. They had achieved technical victory by destroying most human ships, but the cost had been so high that it felt more like defeat. The aliens, who had expected easy conquest against primitive opponents, had instead learned that humans were a force, to be respected and feared. News of the battle spread quickly through both human and alien communication networks, carrying word of the sacrifice made by crews who chose death over surrender. The galaxy began to understand that humans represented something new and dangerous, a species that could not be intimidated or forced into submission by overwhelming force. Commander Jake Morrison stood in the center of the massive council chamber on Kepler Station, surrounded by alien beings that represented 12 different worlds across the galaxy. The air felt thick and heavy, filled with strange smells from a dozen different species breathing the same recycled atmosphere. Blue lights cast eerie shadows on the curved walls, making the whole place feel cold and unwelcoming. Morrison wore his best dress uniform, the dark blue fabric crisp and clean with silver buttons that caught the alien lighting. He had practiced this speech for weeks, knowing that everything he said today could determine whether humanity would find peace among the stars or face a war they were not ready to fight. Behind him stood Lieutenant Colonel Lisa Hamilton, her hand resting near her sidearm out of habit, rather than any real threat. The alien council members sat in a perfect circle around Morrison, each one looking down at him from elevated platforms that made them seem more important than the humans below. At the head of the circle sat Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Empire, his purple skin glistening under the lights and his 4 arms folded across his chest in what Morrison had learned was a sign of boredom or dismissal. To his right, Counselor Velthara of the Nexari shifted her insect-like body, her compound eyes reflecting the light as she watched Morrison with what might have been amusement. Morrison cleared his throat and began to speak, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's advanced sound system. He told them about human history, about wars fought on Earth where soldiers held impossible positions against overwhelming odds, where entire armies chose death over surrender, where single ships rammed into enemy fleets rather than retreat. He explained how humans built their warships not just to fight, but to keep fighting even when everything seemed lost. The aliens listened with what appeared to be polite attention, but Morrison could see the dismissal in their eyes. When he described how human crews would overload their reactors to take enemy ships with them in death, several of the council members made sounds that their translators rendered as laughter. When he explained that human military doctrine considered retreat only as a way to find better ground to continue fighting, Admiral Kethvar actually yawned, showing rows of sharp teeth. Counselor Velthara leaned forward on her platform, her voice coming through the translators as a series of clicks and whistles that somehow conveyed arrogance perfectly. She reminded Morrison that the Galactic Confederation had been keeping peace for over 1,000 years, that their fleets numbered in the thousands, and that their energy weapons could reduce any human ship to atoms in seconds. She suggested that humans might want to reconsider their aggressive tendencies and learn to be more civilized. Morrison felt his jaw tighten, but kept his voice level as he responded. He told them that humans did not consider defensive preparations to be aggressive, and that their warships were designed according to principles that other species might not understand. He explained that every human vessel was built with the assumption that it would eventually face impossible odds, and that when that day came, the ship and crew would make the enemy pay dearly for their victory. Commander Vexanal of the Trilaxian. Republic actually laughed out loud at this, a sound like breaking glass that made Morrison's teeth ache. The tall, thin alien stood up from his platform and gestured with arms that seemed too long for his body. He spoke about how his empire had conquered dozens of worlds, how their plasma cannons had reduced entire fleets to debris clouds, and how no species had ever successfully resisted their expansion once they decided to act. Hamilton stepped forward slightly, her face showing the anger that Morrison was working hard to control. She reminded the council that humans had not come here to threaten anyone, but simply to establish peaceful relations and warn them about potential misunderstandings. She explained that human ships might react differently than expected if attacked, and that this could lead to unnecessary escalation. The alien council erupted in what Morrison realized was their version of laughter. Admiral Kethvar stood up, to his full height, towering over the humans even from his distant platform. He spoke about how the Confederation had dealt with dozens of primitive species who thought they were special, who believed their warrior traditions made them dangerous to civilized beings. He assured Morrison that if humans ever became a problem, they would be dealt with quickly and efficiently. Morrison felt something cold settle in his stomach as he realized that his warnings were not just being ignored, but were actually being seen as entertainment. These beings had no concept of what humans were capable of when pushed to their limits. They saw only a young species with primitive technology, not understanding that humans had been fighting wars since before they discovered fire. He tried one more time, explaining that human warships were not just military vessels but symbols of everything their species stood for. He told them about ships that had fought for days with no power, no weapons, and no hope of survival, simply because their crews refused to give up. He described battles where humans had turned cargo ships into weapons, where they had used their own bodies as guidance systems for missiles, where they had chosen certain death over the possibility of surrender. The aliens continued to show their amusement, but Morrison noticed that a few of them had stopped laughing. Counselor Velthara was studying him more carefully now, her compound eyes reflecting something that might have been curiosity rather than dismissal. One of the smaller aliens, a representative from a species Morrison had not been introduced to, was leaning forward intently. But the majority of the council remained convinced that humans were just another primitive species trying to seem important. Admiral Kethvar dismissed Morrison's warnings as the desperate boasting of a weak civilization trying to avoid conquest through intimidation. Commander Vexonal suggested that perhaps humans needed to learn what real military power looked like. Morrison realized that nothing he could say would change their minds. These beings had lived in peace for so long that they had forgotten what real warfare meant. They fought battles with rules and conventions, where surrender was expected and accepted, where destroying enemy ships was considered sufficient victory. They had no understanding of a species that viewed every battle as a fight for survival. As the session began to wind down, Morrison stood straighter and delivered his final warning. He told them that when they encountered human warships in space, they should remember this conversation. He explained that what they saw as primitive stubbornness was actually an unbreakable will that had carried humans through every challenge they had ever faced. He warned them that human ships might not react the way they expected, and that what looked like defeat to them might just be the beginning of a real fight. The council dismissed him with what their translators rendered as polite thanks, but Morrison could see that they considered the meeting a waste of time. As he and Hamilton left the chamber, he heard the sounds of alien conversation behind them, filled with what he knew was mockery and dismissal. Walking down the corridor toward their quarters, Hamilton finally spoke. She told Morrison that the Aliens clearly had no idea what they were dealing with, and that their arrogance might lead to serious problems. Morrison nodded grimly, knowing that somewhere in space, human ships were exploring new systems and making contact with alien patrols. He hoped that first contact would go smoothly, but he had seen the look in the aliens' eyes. They viewed humans as primitives who needed to be taught their place in the galactic order. Morrison knew from human history that such attitudes usually led to conflict, and when humans were forced to fight, they fought with everything they had. As they reached their quarters, Morrison sent a coded message back to Earth Command, warning them that diplomatic solutions might not be possible and that the fleet should be ready for anything. He ended the message with a simple phrase that every human military officer would understand perfectly. The storm was coming. Captain Ryan Torres stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the stars through the main view screen as his ship conducted routine surveys in the New Harmony system. The exploration vessel was not built for combat, but like all human ships, it carried enough firepower to defend itself if necessary. Torres had served in the Mars Colonial Wars, where he learned that peaceful intentions meant nothing if you could not back them up with force. The bridge crew worked quietly at their stations, scanning planets and asteroids for useful minerals and potential colony sites. Ensign Katie Brooks monitored communications, her headset crackling with routine reports from the survey teams. Lieutenant Commander Dan Walsh supervised the sensor array, mapping gravitational fields and recording data that would help future human ships navigate the system safely. The peace was broken when Brooks suddenly sat up straight at her station, her face going pale as she listened to something in her headset. She turned to Torres with wide eyes and reported that long-range sensors had detected alien ships approaching from the edge of the system. The computer identified them as Zephyrian vessels, the same species that had dismissed human warnings at Kepler Station just 3 months earlier. Torres ordered battle stations, not because he wanted a fight, but because experience had taught him to be ready for anything when dealing with unknown forces. The crew moved with practiced efficiency, powering up weapons and strengthening shields while maintaining their position near the 4th planet. Torres knew that running would make them look guilty of something, and he preferred to meet any challenge head-on. The alien fleet consisted of 3 ships, each one larger and more heavily armed than the Defiance. They moved in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the purple and gold colors of the Zephyrian Empire. As they drew closer, Torres could see weapon ports opening along their sides, revealing energy cannons that glowed with barely contained power. A transmission came through on standard diplomatic frequencies, and Brooks patched it through to the main speakers. The voice belonged to Sub-Admiral Quinthek, who spoke in the arrogant tone that seemed common among Zephyrian officers. He demanded that the human ship surrender immediately and prepare to be boarded for inspection. He claimed that the New Harmony system now belonged to the Galactic Confederation, and that all human vessels were trespassing. Torres felt anger rise in his chest, but kept his voice calm as he responded. He reminded the alien commander that this system had been claimed by humanity under interstellar law, and that his ship was conducting legitimate survey operations with proper authorization. He suggested that any territorial disputes should be settled through diplomatic channels rather than military threats. The alien commander laughed, a sound that came through the speakers like breaking metal. He told Torres that primitive species did not get to claim territory until they proved they could defend it. He explained that the Confederation was tired of dealing with upstart races who thought they deserved equal treatment and that humans needed to learn their proper place in the galactic order. Brooks tried to establish contact with Kepler Station, hoping to get diplomatic support, but the alien ships were jamming all long-range communications. She managed to get through on emergency frequencies, but could only send basic status reports before the jamming intensified. Torres realized that the aliens had planned this confrontation carefully, cutting off any chance for peaceful resolution. Lieutenant Commander Walsh reported that the alien ships were moving into attack formation, their energy weapons charging to full power. Torres knew that his ship could not survive a direct assault from 3 enemy vessels, but he also knew that surrender was not an option. Human ships did not give up without a fight, and the crew of the Defiance would rather die than betray that tradition. Torres ordered his weapons officer to target the lead alien ship, knowing that even if they could not win, they could make the enemy pay for their aggression. The Defiance carried kinetic weapons rather than energy cannons, using solid projectiles that could punch through most types of shields. The weapons were designed for asteroid mining rather than combat, but Torres had learned during the Mars Wars that any tool could become a weapon in the right hands. The first alien ship opened fire without further warning, sending streams of purple energy toward the human vessel. The Defiance shook under the impact, its shields flaring as they absorbed the hostile fire. Torres ordered return fire, sending tungsten slugs racing toward the enemy at incredible speed. The projectiles struck the alien ship's energy shields, which flickered and sparked but held firm. The battle became a deadly dance as the 3 alien ships circled the lone human vessel, pouring fire into its shields while trying to avoid the deadly accurate return shots. Torres used every trick he had learned during the colonial wars, changing speed and direction unpredictably while concentrating his fire on single targets. The crew worked with desperate efficiency, rerouting power from non-essential systems to keep weapons and shields operating. The Defiance scored several hits on the second alien ship, punching holes through its shields and into its hull. The enemy vessel fell back, trailing atmosphere and debris, but the other 2 continued their attack with increased intensity. Torres realized that his ship could not survive much longer under the concentrated fire, but he was determined to take at least one enemy with him. Walsh reported that the main reactor was becoming unstable under the strain of combat, its containment field fluctuating dangerously. Torres saw an opportunity in what most captains would consider a catastrophic failure. He ordered the crew to prepare for ramming speed while manually overriding the reactor safety systems. If the Defiance was going to die, it would die as a weapon. The alien commanders seemed to realize what Torres was planning, because their fire became even more desperate and concentrated. They poured everything they had into the human ship, trying to destroy it before it could reach them. The Defiance's hull began to buckle under the assault, but Torres kept the ship on course toward the nearest enemy vessel. Brooks managed to break through the jamming for just a few seconds, long enough to send a coded message back toward human space. She transmitted the simple phrase that every human officer would understand as a call for military intervention. The message was brief but clear. Human civilians were under attack and needed immediate assistance. The Defiance struck the alien ship at full speed just as its reactor went critical, creating an explosion that lit up the entire system like a small star. Both vessels vanished in the blast, while the remaining alien ships were damaged by debris and radiation. Torres and most of his crew died in the collision, but they had proven that humans would not submit to alien demands without a fight. The surviving crew members, including Brooks and Walsh, were taken prisoner by the remaining alien ships. As they were dragged to the enemy vessels, Brooks saw the look of shock and confusion on the alien faces. The Zephyrians had expected easy surrender, not suicidal resistance that cost them a valuable warship and crew. Sub-Admiral Quinthek questioned Brooks about human military doctrine, unable to understand why her captain had chosen certain death over reasonable surrender. Brooks explained that humans did not consider surrender reasonable when fighting for their freedom, and that every human ship would react the same way when cornered. The alien commander dismissed this as primitive thinking, but she could see doubt in his eyes. The message that Brooks had transmitted was already racing through space toward Earth, carrying news of the attack and the human response. Admiral Sam. Carter received the coded transmission at Terra Command, immediately recognizing it as a call for the fleet. She had been expecting something like this ever since the failed diplomatic mission to Kepler Station, and her ships were already prepared for departure. As the alien ships departed with their prisoners, they left behind a debris field that told its own story. The wreckage of two ships drifted through space, one human and one alien, proof that first contact had gone terribly wrong. The aliens had gotten their victory, but at a cost they had not expected to pay. The Zephyrian Empire would soon learn that attacking human ships carried consequences that their military doctrine had never prepared them to face.